We appreciate you all coming and taking a Saturday afternoon to deal with an issue that is so significant. My name is Professor Vernellia Randall. If you are under 60, you can call me either Professor Randall, Dr. Randall, or Ms. Randall. Really don't care. So,
And I am Sister Zakiya. I'm co-founder of Racial Justice Now. This organization put this event on. We're very happy to have our keynote speaker, Dr. Umar Johnson, here. Many of you know who he is through his various speeches and his book and a lot of the different DVDs that he has out. So we thought that he was the best speaker to come and talk about this issue with the problem that we have with our children and school discipline. Particularly right now, we're working specifically with Dayton Public Schools, but obviously this is a national issue, it's a regional issue, it's a state of Ohio issue. And so we're very glad to have all of you all here, and we hope you enjoy the entire program.
the program is offered in 3 parts. We try to provide you data and information. I will be doing that about the extent of the problem in Dayton. Dayton is in the middle of the road. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that other school districts actually are much worse. And other school districts like Cincinnati are much better. But Dayton represents sort of a middle of the road of Dayton schools. Because we believe that without the data and information arms you with the ability to actually confront people about whether a problem exists and to what extent the problem exists. Then we're going to talk about the petition the proposal that we have before the school board. And then Dr. Umar is going to talk about, do his speech on the role of special education and ADHD. And we allotted a significant amount of discussion time. And then Professor Andrea Salstead is going to end the program with a short discussion on what parents can do if their child gets suspended. What does the law require, that sort of thing. So I'm going to start with some statistics. Let me find it. I thought I had it ready to go. There we go. Okay. Okay. One of the reasons out-of-school suspensions, we look at out-of-school suspensions and expulsions and the disparity in suspension rate. Now let me explain to you what a rate is. A rate is a number calculated to tell you how many times something occurs in a population group. And it's not a percent. So like, it doesn't say 60% of African Americans are suspended. It says of 100 black students, there are 60 suspensions, okay? That rate allows us to compare different population groups of different sizes. Because someone's going to say to you, well, of course there's more suspensions in African Americans because there are more African American students. And excuse me, there's more African American students. And that's right. If you have 20,000 African American students and 5,000 Asian students, you'd expect more suspensions in the African American population. But what you don't expect is for the rate to be different. That is, if the rate is 8.3 for Asian students, then it ought to be around 8.3 for African American students. And what we can see is that's not what's happening. African Americans have 7.3 times more out-of-school suspensions than Asians, which that's the lowest population group in this statistic, and that's for 2012. Boys, you can see, is significantly high, 77.2 out-of-school suspensions per 100 black boys, compared to 15.2 for Asian students. That's 5.1 times more suspensions. Black girls have fewer suspension than black boys, 43 per 100 per black girls, compared to 77 per 100 for black boys, okay? But when compared to other girls, the suspension rate for black girls is 43 times higher than Asian girls. That's essentially, Asian girls aren't suspended. Now, I told this story when I was growing up. I grew up during Jim Crow and in the South, and my foster mother worked used to clean houses. And when she'd come home, one of the ways that she would try to get us to behave correctly is by telling us, white kids don't do this. What is it? You want to clean, you eat your food? White kids eat their food. Running in the house? White kids don't run in the house. Whatever it is she wanted us to do, she would say, white kids don't do that. And if you looked at these numbers, you have to believe that Asian kids don't do this. That Asian kids don't do anything that requires a suspension, and that white kids do very little as compared to black kids. Now, one of the things that people are going to say is this is an economic issue, that there are more black kids than, more poor blacks, and that if you look at economics, that the difference in suspension rate can be explained by the difference in economic. More poor black people means more, if you attribute misbehavior to the environment that people, and I put an if in front of it because I'm not saying I believe that. I'm saying if you do that, then you would look at economics. And actually, poor blacks do get suspended more than blacks who are not economically disadvantaged. If you look at my chart, what you see is 62.1 suspensions per 100 for blacks who are economic disadvantaged, and you see 35.3 for blacks who are not economic disadvantaged. But here's why this isn't an economic issue entirely. Blacks who are not economic disadvantaged have more suspensions in Dayton Public Schools than whites who are disadvantaged and whites who are not disadvantaged. So within the race group, it explains it. But if economics was the issue, then you would expect blacks who are not economic disadvantaged to have a lower suspension rate than whites who are economic disadvantaged, and that's just not true. Now, this issue today, Dr. Umar is going to be talking about disability, and so I wanted to show you the difference in disability, and the disability works out the same way. Blacks who are disabled have a higher suspension rate, 84.1 per 100, than blacks who are not disabled. But blacks who are not disabled have a higher suspension rate than everyone else. So you can't just blame disability on what's going on in Dayton. When you look, just to give you an idea, because we're going to be talking about ADHD, to give you an idea, emotionally disturbed black children have 248.1 suspensions per 100 kids. Think about that for a second. 248.1 suspensions per 100 kids. That is, for every kid, there are 2.5 suspensions for every emotionally disturbed black child. Oh, I need to plug in my plug-in's over there, thank you. Although I'm gonna be through in a second, so hopefully we'll get through. Black disabled kids who are, yes, that's it. Just plug it, bring it over. Black disabled kids in pre-K through 3rd grade have a much higher risk of being suspended than other kids. Kindergarten, black disabled kids in kindergarten are 39 times more suspensions in kindergarten than other kids. 1st grade, 6.1 times more suspensions. 2nd grade, 12 times more suspension. So a black disabled kid has a significantly higher risk in the Dayton Public School of being suspended. And our campaign is about preschool to 3rd grade, which all of the information says that suspending preschool to 3rd grade is developmentally inappropriate. Nevertheless, we have a significant higher rate of there's another piece in the bag. So you can see that black kids are at higher rate. This is not black disabled kids. I didn't actually do that for this particular slide. So this is all, what I want to show is I wanted to give you the numbers that establish the problems. Because oftentimes, you know, if you get into anecdotal stories, you can get a story that supports this, and you can get a story that goes against it. But when you look at the numbers in aggregate, they tell a story by themselves. And what they say is black kids are at a higher risk of being suspended than any other group, and it's significantly higher, and that includes our babies, preschool to 3rd grade. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll entertain some short questions only over the data.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The information, the data that you provided, did that come directly from the Dayton Public School System?
It came directly from the Ohio Department of Education website, which the Dayton Public School reports that data into it. It's the 2012 data, which is the most recent information on the Ohio website. I actually went through it last night on the idea that I would update the data if there was new data, but there isn't any new data yet. But yes, it's data, it's official data reported to the Ohio Department of Education, and it's available for anyone. If you go to the advanced reports, Ohio has an amazing amount of data available, and if you go to advanced reports, go ahead. If you go to advanced reports, you can run the data yourself. The problem is it's not very user-friendly because it's in Excel files, but you can run the data and use it for yourself. Yes. Thank you. That answer?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Is there any data available for the other school systems in this area with the same criteria?
Yes, there is data, and we actually have been starting to look at it. There's not only data available for other school systems, but charter schools, which have some of the worst statistics. Some of the charter schools are suspending children at 3 to 4 times the rate that Dayton does. And the urban, all of the school districts are available on Ohio Department of Education website.
So why is it that we don't get the data from other systems to determine how blacks are doing there also?
Well, we do that.
Well, Okay.
You mean, why didn't I give a comparison?
No, I don't mean you, but it seemed like it would be fair to have that comparison also, because you kind of give the, well, just me as an individual, I'm kind of, it's kind of like blaming the black kids for this data, for the results. Okay, so I want to see if, maybe the Dayton public school system has a problem.
Well, what I said is that at the very beginning, that's a very good question. What I said at the beginning is Dayton is in the middle of the pack of the urban 8 in terms of their numbers. They're not the worst, but they're clearly not the best either. They're not anywhere close to the best. And everybody has a racial disparity.
Everybody.
Okay, and in fact, one of the things that happens is, for instance, Cincinnati, the reason we focus on out-of-school suspensions is because of the impact, not because other forms of discipline can't have a racial disparity. Okay, but if you have other forms of discipline that keeps the child in school, that has a different impact than a discipline that puts the child out. So Cincinnati, which has an incredibly low suspension rate, overall suspension rate, like 2.1 per 100, when you go into their other discipline data, they have a racial disparity as well. Okay, so so yes, we do look at it, but we think our position is we don't have to compare. We think comparing other districts is like my foster mother, bless her heart. She wasn't the best, but she wasn't the worst either. She used to say, don't compare yourself to other people. Because there's always somebody better than you and always someone worse than you, and that doesn't tell you what you need to do. And so the question is we can look at this data, and we don't need to know how we compare to other districts to know whether it's unacceptable. And if it's unacceptable, it's unacceptable, and it doesn't matter what the other districts are doing. So that's how we don't do a comparison. But we definitely looked at the other data so that we can answer your question. Okay, does that answer it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other? One more and then we'll stop.
Okay, I'm gonna tell my age. But being that as it
You already put it up there. No, someone else did. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I'm looking at the juxtaposition. I know what we did when I was at Roosevelt and what's going on now. Now, we did have detention, and we thought it was a whole bunch, but as I compare now, it was little or nothing. And we called it the Sunset Club. You didn't want to belong to that Sunset Club for a long time because you caught it at home. And I don't have to talk about what happened back then. But is there any way, or is it because the teachers don't want to stay, that you can have the study hall room, which we had a long room there, study hall room, and when the children came in, when we came in, they wanted to know if we had homework and stuff. And you better have something, some kind of homework. What has happened? I know the teachers are scared of the students. I mean, that's evident. But is there any way they can go back and say, okay, we're going to have a couple of study hall rooms if they have a big room or what have you, and let the children, I agree with you, if you're out of school, you can't learn. But is there any way they can go back and say, okay, Carol, let me see what you have for homework, and have those kids stay there? Maybe if they do their homework there, maybe if the instructors look and say, where's your homework? I've got none,
So,
Yeah.
I think the question you're asking is about what interventions can take place, what to do different. And that's a great question. What I'd like to do is defer that question until after Dr. Umar's presentation, and we'll get into the discussion about what we need to do, or what we want to do, or what we want to recommend. Right now, I just want to make sure that everybody understands the data as I present it.
By the way, I did belong to the Sunset Club 3 times.
Okay.
3 times I was there.
Okay, one more question. Is it about the data?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I was just wondering, just for my own clarity, you're just reporting the data that you found, but you're not attaching a specific cause as to why it is.
Not at this stage.
Okay.
I'm just presenting, we have a whole program for the day, and at this stage, all we're trying to do is put the data out there.
Okay.
I can tell you that it's not because black kids are worse behaved. Okay, but I think Dr. Umar will probably deal with some of that in his presentation. Okay, I'm gonna stop so we can keep moving, and Maria.
Hello, everyone. Does everybody have a program?
We'll get them out to you. Yeah, thank you.
If you don't have a program, just raise your hand and Brother Tyrone can make sure you get one. I'm going to talk a little bit about our petition that's currently in front of the Dayton School Board. And so our main focus is focusing on stopping out of school suspensions for grades pre-K through third grade. And so some of the information that Professor Randall shared with you, and then if some of you have attended any of the Dayton School Board meetings, we've had several professionals come to talk about the inappropriateness of suspending children in that age group out of school. And as most of you all know, as parents and here community members, we know that Ohio has this third grade reading guarantee, and we know that a lot of our children in the urban districts, in Dayton as well, are having trouble reading and passing those tests. And so we think that suspending children, for inappropriate behavior during this time is something that the school district needs to take on and really make sure that we're teaching and molding children to show them what the best behavior is instead of suspending them out of school. All the data, all the research shows that children learn nothing when they're suspended out of school and they're not learning to change their behavior. So on the inside of the program, we have the several points that we introduced to the Dayton School Board. And so the very first one, and I'll read them, is to train and support and assist teachers and principals in culturally relevant and responsive teaching and bias-free discipline. The research shows that there's definitely bias when it comes to disciplining children, especially children of color. This is a national issue, so obviously with the numbers that you just saw, it's reflected also within our own school district here in Dayton. Again, the mainstay is to adopt a moratorium immediately on out-of-school suspensions for preschool through third grade, adopt a moratorium on out-of-school suspensions for non-violent behavior such as disobedient behavior, truancy, use of tobacco, and profanity. We're giving the school district to school year 2016-2017 to eliminate racial disparities in all rates of forms and discipline, including suspensions in and out of school and school-based arrests and placements in alternative schools. We're asking the district to publish disaggregated data on a quarterly basis and put it up on their website for the public to be able to review, and to also develop a school board working group on discipline and race to monitor, evaluate, and assess the implementation of each strategy and make further recommendations. We expect a decision, I believe, on June 17th, which is the next business meeting for the Dayton School Board, based on these points that we've introduced to them. And before I go to the next part, does anybody have any questions regarding those points we just looked at and talked about?
What time is it? I know it's on Ludlow, but what time is it on June 17th?
Yes, the school board meetings are always at 6 p.m.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I wanted to take a few minutes to recognize, see a few familiar faces from Dayton Public Schools. We have a school board member here, Ms. Sheila Taylor, thank you for being here. Ms. Tony Perry Gillespie, one of the superintendent's deputies, and I think I see some principal, I'm sorry, sister, I can't remember your name. I think you're at Westwood.
Sherry Moss.
Sherry Moss, thank you for being here. And Mr. Dion Sampson, who also works at Westwood Elementary School. Thanks for coming. Without further ado, I know this is where most of you guys are here. I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Umar Johnson is a doctor of clinical psychology and a certified school psychology is an expert on the education and mental health of African and African American children. Dr. Umar is an educational diagnostician who specializes in special education issues. He is known most of his work in identifying misdiagnosed learning disabled and ADHD students. As a child therapist, he's worked with depressed and behaviorally challenged males. Dr. Umar is the author of the new book, Psychoacademic Holocaust, the Special Education and ADHD Wars Against Black Boys, which is in the back for purchase after the program today. The first book that's ever written by an African American male school psychologist to Black parents with specific strategies on how to fight back against special education, ADHD, and racism in the educational system. Dr. Umar is currently working on building his new school, the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey RBG Leadership Academy for Boys. He can be reached at drumarjohnson.com. So Dr. Umar Johnson. We're going to give Dr. Johnson a few minutes to set up his information there so he can do his presentation. At this time, I can take a few questions if anybody had any questions for me regarding our proposal or anything that you just want to ask in general while we allow him to set up. Yeah.
When will you venture out to other school districts? Like Trotwood, for example, possibly Northmont?
Yes, that's a really good question. We've actually been getting a lot of requests from parents who have kids in other school districts and charter schools. We're definitely looking at branching out to other school districts. We know that some of the other school districts like Trotwood and Jefferson, who have large numbers of African American students, have some significant problems as well. Just from the preliminary data that we've looked at, they're actually worse than Dayton Public. I guess everybody wants to know why we started with Dayton Public. First of all, my son is in Dayton Public Schools, right? So I wanted to start with Dayton Public for that reason. And also, most of our children in the county, since Dayton Public Schools has around 15,000 children, are in Dayton Public Schools. And so we thought we could make the biggest impact by starting with the largest school district in the county. There's also problems. I mean, there's problems with all of the schools in Montgomery County. I mean, the racial disparities are huge. Even Oakwood, what do they have, like maybe 2 or 3 black students in the whole district? I mean, so.
And their suspension rate,
The
their
suspension
disparity rate between black students and white students is 11 times more suspension rate among the black students. We say they just moved, but suspending that same black student over and over again. And I can say that as a parent who had a child graduated from Oakwood.
Right. So I guess we don't have a definitive answer yet, but we are looking at other school districts in the county. But because of who we are as racial justice now, we're actually going to be focusing on districts who have higher numbers of African American children. So Trotwood would be one of those, and obviously Jefferson Township as well. But right now we're working specifically with Dayton, and we're going to continue to work with Dayton Public Schools, you know, depending on what happens on June 17th. How much more energy we need to put into that will be determined from that at that point. Yes, ma'am.
To piggyback off of what you just said in his question, with what you just said, and we may have children in other districts.
Right.
Would it be appropriate for like parents such as us to observe so we can kind of adopt some of those and probably initiate some of those programs ourselves?
That is huge. Brother Rashid and I are actually been in communication. We actually do need parents, right, in these other school districts. We need parents, community members, people who are just concerned about what's happening with their children. We can't do it all. So definitely we need the community support, and parents are key. We need the students as well to speak up for themselves. I mean, we would love to hear stories about, you know, different things that have happened, you know, to students and parents in these districts. I mean, you know, all of the research and all of this whole national, there's just a national push for this right now, and it's coming all the way down from the president's office. I mean, he has his My Brother's Keeper initiative where he just released his 90-day report. just yesterday, and we were happy to see that some of the things that we've actually included in our petition to Dayton Public Schools was actually in his My Brother Keeper report, and one of those was to stop suspending and using punitive discipline for the younger ages, was actually in his report. His Office of Civil Rights under the Department of Justice and Department of Education are ramping up enforcement. So, you know, if you have a school district who's not complying with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and have a huge racial disparity, that can be brought up with a complaint with both of those offices. So there's a lot of different recourses now.
I mean, I'm just asking because sometimes we want to assist, but we don't know how do you initiate, where do you go, what is your options?
We would be happy to work with a parent
Absolutely.
group from another, we can't take the lead in another school district, but we can definitely.
Dr. Umar?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Brothers and sisters, thanks for coming out. I want to thank the brothers and sisters who worked together to bring me here. I want to thank them dearly for that. I've never been to Dayton, Ohio. This is my first and hopefully not my last time. I've been almost everywhere else. Columbus, several times. Cleveland State University, several times. Youngstown, not too long ago. Akron, and points beyond. But first time in Dayton. And tomorrow I'll be back in Cincinnati. For those of you who are near that neck of the state, I'll be there at the Asili Museum from 2 o'clock until 10 o'clock tomorrow in Cincinnati. I want to get right into the information, a lot of it that I want to give out, a lot for you to think about. As Sister Zakiya said, I'm author of the first book ever written to teach y'all, African parents in particular, how to fight back against special education, ADHD, and unfair school discipline practices. So if you don't have a copy of my book, Psychoacademic Holocaust, and you're raising a black child, especially an African male child, I don't know how you're going to go forward without it. It's the only book that's ever been written teaching you step by step what to do about everything that the school might want to throw at you. The book is a very good primer on special ed law as well as regular education law. By practice, I'm a school psychologist. I'm also a doctor of clinical psychology. I'm a child therapist, former school administrator, and as the good sister said, I'm working to build my own school district, the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey RBG International Leadership Academies for the boys, and the Anna Douglas and Amy Jakes Garvey RBG International Leadership Academy for our young ladies. It's going to be an independent school, not a charter school, and I'm going to talk about why I do not want a charter school in a little while also today. But my goal is to make sure you leave from here with a better understanding of what's being done to our children, how it's being done, but more importantly, what we can do to reverse it. Now, I heard some of you mention earlier that you're interested in getting involved to make a difference in the schools. Well, one thing we're going to do today, okay, and I don't know if we have paper, if we could start a sign-up sheet out there, but I want everyone here who's interested to be able to sign up for the Dayton Independent Black Parents Association. Name, phone number, email, and committee. Name, phone number, email, and committee. On January the 1st, I started a new movement, the National Independent Black Parents Association, to organize us in every school district in this country and outside this country, as a matter of fact, because the problems also exist in Canada, London, South America, and the Caribbean, where I just came from last week. So we need to be organized so we can put pressure against the school districts where we live to bring about the change that is necessary. I want to be clear. The reason why you see what is happening to African children is because we are not involved in the schooling of our children.
Come on.
Most of us never show up to school board meetings. I could go to almost any school board meeting in America where the African American children predominate, and if I'm lucky, I'll see 5 blacks in a meeting full of 1,000 people.
That's right.
And the 5 blacks who will be there looking for a contract from the school district, not necessarily to fight to protect our children.
Come on.
So I'm saying all that to say that although I'm going to talk about the responsibility of the miseducation machine, because that's what it is. There is no school district in this country. There's only miseducation machines. And although we're going to talk about them, I have to talk about our culpability as a people for not doing nothing but complaining. You got to get up and do something. This information that I'm going to go over today is good. It's going to help you. But guess what? We can get far more done as a group than we could ever as an individual.
That's right.
Sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. And we got to be able to come together to make this situation work. It doesn't make sense for 25 individual black parents to be fighting against ADHD. If you're all fighting the same struggle, why isn't that being coordinated? If 20 of y'all dealing with kids who are constantly being suspended from school over and over again, why are you fighting by yourself instead of in a coordinated effort? So, we want to build the Dayton Independent Black Parent Association. Don't leave here without signing up, okay? And this is going to be important too, because as we work with Professor Randall, Sister Zakiya, this is going to be good. Why? Because in our struggles as a people, politically, economically, culturally, educationally, doesn't matter. We need to have a balanced attack. In other words, we need people who are within the system working through the proper protocol as laid out by the powers that be. That's the good professor. It's necessary, it's relevant. But then we need a separate component that is totally grassroots, that does not have to answer to any powers that be. And so you have both strategies operating simultaneously, communicating with each other to bring about the quickest result. But in other words, if Dr. King and Malcolm could work together, with both strategies in play at the same time, everyone wins. It doesn't have to be strategy A, and it doesn't have to be strategy B. It should be both of them working in concert with each other to bring about the greatest benefit for our children. So what are the 7 committees? I want you to know the 7 committees. So when you sign up, you can put down the committee you're most interested in. If you don't know what committee you're interested in, leave it blank. You can always sign up later. Okay? Number 1, a special ed committee. That means what? We have to investigate special ed in every school in Dayton, every single one. How many black children are in special ed in school 1? And not only are how many in special ed, what are they in special ed for? How many are in for speech and language versus intellectual disability? How many are in for intellectual disability versus the specific learning disability? How many are in for SLD versus emotional disturbance? How many are in for emotional disturbance versus ADHD, ain't no daddy at home disorder?
Come on. Right.
So we need to make sure we know exactly what's going on in every school. You gotta have the data. Without the data, you can't fight the system.
That's right.
Without the data, you cannot fight the shooting in the dark. Are those kids in special ed full-time? Or are they in special ed part-time? Or are they in special ed itinerantly, where they simply get pulled out to get the extra help that they need? In school number 1, most of the black boys might be sentenced to special ed in the 1st grade. In school number 2, most of the black boys might be sentenced to special ed in the 3rd grade. School number 3, it might be the 8th grade. We need to know the data. Once we have the data, then we can sit down with the principals and the superintendents and any other administrator who's responsible for the miseducation machine and ask the question, what is going on with your principal in school number 1? Why does she have so many kindergarten black boys being evaluated for special ed? If a child is 5 or 6 years old, how in the hell can you tell me he got a reading disability when he ain't even been taught how to read yet?
Right.
Now, some of this, parents, is common sense. Right. Some of this is common sense. Why are you getting your son evaluated for a reading disability in the 1st grade? He ain't even been in school long enough to learn how to read. You don't need a doctorate degree for that. That's common sense. So we have to start exercising common sense on our behalf. And one of the things I need everybody to understand right now up front, you heard it from me quoted, tattoo it on your body. The disabilities that we diagnose for special ed, most of them cannot be objectively proven to exist.
That's right.
The learning disability is an idea. You cannot prove it. If you can, prove it to me. I got $1 million. ADHD is an idea. You cannot prove it. If you can prove it, I got $1 million. Emotional disturbance is an idea. You cannot prove it. If you can prove it, I got $1 million for you. These are ideas, not facts. But what we do is we take somebody else's opinion of our child and we project it on our baby, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Raheem could learn how to read, but he can't learn now because you brought it to somebody's idea that he couldn't. So special ed committee, second committee, school discipline. We got to investigate the school discipline practices school by school in Dayton. Can anybody tell me how many black boys were expelled from Dayton Public School last year? Can anybody tell me how many black boys are expelled from school on a regular basis, on a daily basis? How many boys are home not being educated because of a school suspension? We need to know this. How many parents are being called up to school to take their child out for half day for behavior? We got to know district-wide because this is a civil rights violation.
That's right.
And it may be time for us to put in a complaint against Dayton Public Schools with the United States Department of Education Office of Civil Rights.
That's right.
But we cannot do that until we first given the district an opportunity to fix their problems. You got to go up the chain first. So we got to gather the data, come up with an action plan for each of the 7 committees, respectfully sit down with their administrators and say, what are we going to do about this? And then we want to see changes. We just don't want to hear about proposals because they will propose you to death.
Right.
Okay? What are you going to do?
Right.
Give them a chance because some people mean well. And I'm not going to stand here and say that every white person has it out for black children. I'm not going to say that. I know some very good white teachers. But I also know in the general scheme of things, there's a racial disconnect between a middle-class white female and a black boy. I know it because I've seen it and I've supervised it and I've also intervened in it. Which is to say that one of the biggest problems in schooling is the fact that there's not enough black male teachers to help out with it. Our boys need men. They ain't got them at home because they're being mass incarcerated by the American social order. That's where ADHD comes from. When did we get ADD? 1980. Is that a coincidence? No, that's when they start locking up black men in mass. When did we get ADHD? 1990. Is that a coincidence? No, that's when they intensified the incarceration war. Strip the father from the home, leave the boy there with his dad, with his mother, and because the mother can't do as well raising a boy as the father can when it comes to discipline. Not in other areas, ladies, we're talking about discipline. Because by nature, you are maternal, you're the lover, you're the nurturer. And because of that, sometimes y'all can be a little soft on the discipline, and you mothers know exactly what I'm talking about. ADHD is almost exclusively a single mother household issue. You don't get ADHD when fathers are home. It is a researchable fact. You don't believe me, go to the library. It is a single mama thing. And I'm not picking on you, mama, because it ain't your fault. In fact, I blame the black men in Dayton who should be helping our sisters raise these boys on their own. That's who I blame, not the mother. But it ain't got nothing to do with psychiatry. It ain't got nothing to do with psychology. It's a boy being hungry for masculine energy. Where is the masculine energy in the public school? It ain't there. When they fly me around this country to come and talk about how we can fix the black male crisis, do you know what my #1 recommendation is? Every school district I go to, and no school district yet has acted on it. I say, if you really care about these black boys, if you really want to reduce special ed, which you don't because you get paid for it, but we're going to talk about that later. If you really want to reduce special ed, if you really want to reduce dropout, push out, because nobody gets dropped out, they get pushed out. If you really want to reduce ADHD, psychiatric med, gang banging, low test scores, yada, 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 they give every black boy in your school district a strong black male teacher. You cut it in half overnight. Overnight! So why are we having conferences and peace treaties for? You know what the solution is.
Right.
But there's a problem with that solution. It's racially based.
Right.
And we live in a post-racial society because we got a black president, so we're not supposed to be looking at people's skin color. Let me explain something to you right here, right now.
Come on with
You won't solve a single problem for black folks if you don't deal with the role of racism in it.
That's right.
Because racism is at the core of every problem we got. So if you've been drinking the Obama Kool-Aid, it's time to wake up. But there's another issue. There's another issue, and that issue is what? The teachers' unions are some of the strongest unions in America. If you want to change public education, you got to fight the American Federation of Teachers. That's a powerful group. You got to fight the National Education Association. That's a powerful group. You know how many teachers in America? You got more teachers in America than you have for almost any trade union in this country. So when you talk about changing public school, you're talking about making middle-class white teachers do things differently. That's not a popular topic. And that's why when people run for city council in your city, and when they run for mayor and state rep and U.S. rep and council person and governor and lieutenant governor, they do not like to talk about anything that's going to upset the teachers because they need their vote on election day. And that's why it's so difficult to change public education, because you got to be willing to stand up to the teacher unions.
That's right.
You're talking about bringing in black males. That means you got to lay off white women. America ain't built on inconveniencing white folks for the benefit of black, but it is built on inconveniencing black for the benefit of white. So the reason why you don't see Dayton school districts in a rush to hire more black males is because you're taking away jobs from white women. White privilege, brothers and sisters. You got to understand how it operates in the school system. So the second committee is school discipline. And what do I find so ironic about school discipline? They keep talking about low test scores for black males, right?
Right.
You know why the test score is so low? Because he ain't in school long enough to learn, because you keep sending him home. If a boy is being suspended 2 days a week, that's 2, 4, 6, 8 to 10 days a month, and the boy reading or math skills is low, why are you sending him for an evaluation from the school psychologist when you know the reason the boy can't read? You don't let him learn. It should be illegal for a child who's routinely suspended to be tested for special ed. The reason for the skills deficit is too much suspension.
That's right.
Third committee is going to be school policy, because y'all have policies in Dayton that do not benefit black children, that need to be changed. But I need y'all to understand the difference between policy and law. Laws are made at the State Department of Education. Once the state makes the law, they then give it to every school district in Ohio, and every school district in Ohio creates their own policy from the law. So for example, if you live in Cincinnati, the last day of school might be June 10th. If you live in Dayton, it might be June 11th. If you live in Columbus, it might be June 28th. Why do you have different last days of school if it's not set by the state? Because every school district is allowed to make their own policy. For example, using profanity in Dayton might get you a 2-day suspension, but only an after-school detention in Columbus, because every district has their own policy. So what you have to do is investigate the policies in Dayton, which are not laws. They are only local operating procedures. And if the policy is not working for your child, we organize, we come together, we fight, we change it legally. Let me give you an example. Your son lives on the west side of Dayton, but he's a straight-A kid, brilliant. None of the schools on the west side of Dayton are sufficient to meet that boy's needs. The best school in Dayton is on the north side of Dayton. You want Raheem to go north, but the principal says we can't, because it is our policy in Dayton to make the children attend the school in their geographical neighborhood. So even though all the schools in his geographical neighborhood are garbage, he can't go elsewhere because that's our policy. So then your next question should be, but is it the state's law? Because if it ain't the state's law, you're going to change it. Are y'all following me? But we got to have a policy committee to research it, to see if it's a law or is it just a policy. Because even if it's a law, we can change it, but then we got to bring in the state legislature. That's going to take a little bit more time. But if you want to change your policy, that can happen overnight. All you got to do is occupy the school board meeting. Y'all got to learn how to start occupying the school board meeting. You want something done? Show up with 1,000 black parents, respectfully, not breaking the law, but let them know we want this change. Oh, you don't want to change it? We're going to go holler at the mayor. Because even though the mayor don't control the schools, the mayor has influence over what happens in the schools. So, Mr. Mayor, we need this policy change, and if it don't change, you ain't too popular in this city, you might not get reelected on election day.
Right.
We go to our state reps, and we go to our state senators. who control the law and say we need this changed or you might not get reelected. We have to use our political power to influence the educational atmosphere.
That's right.
You can do it, brothers and sisters, but you can't do it being lazy. And one of the biggest problems of the black community is we love to talk, we love to yap, we love to scream, we love to shout, but we do not like to get up and make something happen. Next committee. So we talked about a special ed committee. We got that sign-up sheet, my brother. It's passing around. Make sure you sign it. Make sure nobody leave without it. Ashe. Okay? Make sure nobody leave with it either.
Right.
We had a couple people run off with the list. Took it to the FBI. But anyway, we got the school special ed committee, discipline committee, policy committee. Next committee is the social committee. This is going to be a committee that puts on positive programs to help our single parents out with their children. Because we got a lot of single parents out there struggling, male, female, as well as grands and parents. And they need some help. I don't blame single mothers for everything that goes wrong in the hood. Some of us like to use our single mothers as an scapegoat.
Right.
They are not the problem. The black community is responsible. In African culture, we embrace a village concept. That means everybody is responsible for the violence. Everybody is responsible for the dropout. Why are you blaming the weakest person on the totem pole? Do you realize that at least 1/3 of all black mothers in this country are dealing with a medical issue? Potentially fatal? So she raising 5 kids and she got heart disease. You want to blame her? She raising 3 kids and she's dealing with epilepsy, diabetes, could have a stroke any day now. Cancer. I'm not blaming her. She's doing the best she can. What we got to do is rally around her and help her out. So a social committee is going to do that. Next committee is important also. It's called school finance. If you're on this committee, you know what you're going to do? You're going to investigate what are they doing with the extra special ed money they get. How is each principal spending their budget on an annual basis? You have a right to that information because it's your tax dollars that's funding the school. How much money are you spending on the football team versus the reading tutoring program? How much money are you spending on the basketball team versus helping these children improve their math skills? That's right. We don't even know that. Who gets the contracts from Dayton Public School? When's the last time a black person had the contract to clean the bathrooms in the schools? When's the last time a black person had a contract to replace the paper and the pens and the pencils? When the last time we had a contract to put in the cameras and the surveillance equipment in the schools? Do we even know what percentage of contracts in Dayton Public Schools are going to black folk? You mean to tell me people robbing you blind with your own tax dollar and you're not going to do nothing about it?
Right.
Public school is the biggest racket in America. I'm serious. You got people getting grants and contracts and ain't even doing nothing with the money but putting it in their pocket. You got people who don't look like you who got contracts to run the after school programs for our children. Here you is with a summer camp and you can't even get a dime. You're running the summer camp, feeding our kids and teaching them culture. You can't get a dime. But there's somebody living in the suburbs who got a $100,000 contract. You don't even know they exist because they never even operated the program. It all goes in their pocket. We need a finance committee to investigate the money and track it on down. Special ed kids are worth twice the money. Y'all do know that. Oh, special ed is a money. Special ed is a business. Special ed is a hustle. Special ed is a racket. That's right. The minute I say your son need an IEP, his name goes into a computer. It gets transferred to the State Department of Education. That gets transferred to Obama. And by the end of the month, an electronic transfer of funds is sent back to the district for your child. Let me make it real simple.
Come on.
Brother here, regular student. Sister here, regular student. Sister here gets tested by Dr. Umar next week. I diagnose her with autism. He gets $6,000 a year spent on his education, hypothetically. I don't know what the per pupil is in Dayton. But let's say it's $6,000. Once I say she needs special ed, she ain't worth $6,000. She worth $12,000. And they get that extra $6,000 each and every year. Your child is in special ed. So your son is in 2nd grade. He got 10 more years of school. He's been diagnosed with a reading disability, which is absolutely trifling because you should have never let it happen in the first place. How you got a reading disability in the 2nd grade? Give me a break. Okay? So he got 10 more years of special ed. He gets an extra $6,000. 6,000 times 10 is $60,000. So that's an extra $60,000 for one child. How about 100 of them? How about 500 of them? How about 1,000 of them? How many black kids do we have in Dayton times $6,000? They running a racket on you and your baby. That's why black kids go in special ed and never come out. Because if I take them out, I'll lose the extra funding. How many people getting paid off your child's misdiagnosis? I live it. And I'll debate anybody on it. What's the next committee? So we got special ed committee, we got discipline committee, we got finance committee, we got social committee, policy, 2 more, homeschooling and parent advocacy. Homeschooling committee is to help parents who are already homeschooling their child or plan on doing so, to help them do it right. Because some of y'all homeschooling, y'all don't fill out the proper paperwork, you don't go through the proper procedure, the school district puts you on the truancy list, and the next thing you know, they're taking your kids out your house because you didn't do it properly. You gotta follow the process, brothers and sisters, or they will take your children. I know parents all across this country fighting to keep their kids because they decided to homeschool, but ain't tell nobody. This is the realness.
Right.
Okay? Plus, I also know that there's some of us who talk about we homeschooling and we ain't doing nothing but home fooling. The kids never get taught.
Right.
We talking about we gonna homeschool our kid because we too lazy to make sure they go to school on time. And since the school breathing down your neck for the child being late every day, you just say, I'm gonna start homeschooling. And then 3-4 years go by, you ain't teach your child nothing. You try to stick them back in school. They send them to Dr. Umar to get tested, and now the boy look like he learning disabled. When the problem is his parents never taught him. Don't homeschool your child if you know you're not organized. Don't homeschool your child if you know you ain't going to be consistent. Because time goes by really fast, and before you know it, a whole school year went by, you ain't sat down one time to give that boy no lesson. Trifling black parents, yes, we have those. They're like some of y'all who will get your child misdiagnosed for a check. We have those. That's right, ADHD for money. Crazy dollars. That's right. Crazy dollars. I want you to go to school and act like you don't know nothing so mommy can get your check. And then when Dr. Umar comes along and reevaluates your child, I find out ain't nothing wrong with this boy. Now you get mad at me because if I take the diagnosis off, the check stops coming. Pimping your child. Help the school pimping the child, you pimping the child, psychologist pimping the child, psychiatrist, therapist, behavior worker. Look at everybody getting paid because you don't want to teach him discipline. That's your #1 job if you're raising a black boy. This is America, Jack. And they waiting for him to mess up one time. Ain't no second chance.
Right.
My single mothers, you listen to me. The reason why you got to be consistent with the discipline is you got to make sure your son understands that out there is no second chance. Right. But in your house, he gets second chances. In your house, he gets third chances. Right. In your house, he gets forgiveness. In your house, he gets red lights and blue lights and purple lights and green lights. And what the hell is a green light? If the boy messed up, he gets a consequence, mother. Well, yes, but he had a good afternoon, so I decided to let it pass. You set that boy up for failure. Right. He don't get no passes in American society. Teach him discipline.